I do think that there is just this sort of paradox where it's exciting at the beginning of the year to set these reading goals, but focusing on the wrong things can make it more stressful and result in us actually reading less. If you aren't retaining what you're reading and incorporating certain things from it into your life and enjoying the process, then what's the point, right? So maybe you're like me and you've set lofty reading goals in the past and then ended up getting stressed out by it or falling short. I know about 10 years ago, I used to always set these goals to read like 150 books a year, and I never did. Part of the problem was focusing on the number of books exclusively, and I would also outline every single book that I was going to read in that time period, and it left no fun and room to add in books that were just coming out or that I found at bookstores, which took away some of the joy for me personally also. So I've come to a place where I've found that if you want to read more and hit bigger reading goals, or just prioritize reading in your life, because I think at the core that's what it should really be about, there are some key strategies that I have built into my reading practice that I think could be helpful to other people so that you can enjoy reading and retain what you're learning from the books that you're reading instead of focusing on the number that you need to hit. And Arthur is in kitty jail for a minute because he keeps playing with my camera and trying to pull it over. If you aren't retaining what you're reading and incorporating certain things from it into your life and enjoying the process, then what's the point, right? It shouldn't be about speed reading and boasting about the number of books that you've read or hitting a specific target. It should be about enjoying the process and loving books and learning. So when I shifted my focus and incorporated certain practices into my daily routine around reading, I saw a huge change, and I have been reading more than I did when I used to set those old goals. So today I'm going to talk about building a reading practice that fits into your life in a way that will ensure that you actually do read more this year. So you can truly enjoy being a reader at whatever pace makes sense for you and have it add to your life and make it better, not more stressful. So first, I want to dig into, again, a little more what the problem is, I think, and it's goals versus practice. And let me add first, I don't think that this is a problem for everyone necessarily. Some people really thrive off of the goals-oriented approach with reading, but some people like me don't. So if that's you, then I think this video could be helpful. So goals are outcome-focused and finite. This would be reading 50 books by the end of 2026. That's a goal. But a practice-centered goal is different. Practices are process-focused, ongoing, and about showing up daily or weekly. Goals have endpoints. Practices are lifelong and evolving. It's a system that will help you meet your goal. But focusing on that instead of the actual goal is, I think, more helpful for me anyway. I'll give you another analogy. A common goal that a lot of people have is to get in shape at the beginning of the year, right? That's something that I have been working on. And I have found and learned through experts in the fitness space and just with my own experimentation that focusing on losing a certain amount of weight versus incorporating practices that support that goal have very different outcomes. When I fixate on wanting to lose a certain amount of weight or gain a certain amount of muscle by X date, I fail every time. But when I start focusing on incorporating better eating habits daily and with consistency and showing up at the gym and doing my strength training sets, I see progress a lot faster and I am enjoying the process. That's where, just for me personally, and if you're like me, again, it works for some people, right? And I'm not trying to take away from that. For 3 reasons I think that this numbers-based, deadline-based goal setting, especially with reading, can really backfire. One is it can create a sort of shame spiral where, if you fall behind 1 month, it just kind of creates this endless loop where you're like, I'm already behind anyway. And so you give up on it too early. And then you start avoiding reading because it feels more stressful and you keep ruminating on the fact that you'll never catch up to where you want to be. Or you start choosing your books based on how quickly they'll help you meet the goal, instead of choosing books that are actually aligned with where you are in life and what you really want to be reading. And then reading becomes transactional. Finishing books becomes more important than experiencing them. You skim, you rush, you speed read, and you're not really taking the time to integrate and think about what it is you're reading. And then there's the experience of starting a book, not liking it, not finishing it, and that feeling like a failure instead of a curation of your reading list. And ultimately, it just creates the wrong relationship with reading, I think. We want to be optimizing for the quality of the experience, not the quantity. Numbers-based goals can provide some people with motivation, and that works for them, and that's awesome. But if you find yourself getting stuck in that same loop and spiral that I used to, where you're feeling guilty a couple of months into the year and you start dreading reading instead of enjoying it, then I think that this video could help you. So how do we create a reading practice that will make us actually read more and give us the results that we want? So I'll share with you the 6 elements that I incorporated to establish a reading practice that helped me read more, enjoy the process, and hit my goals. And actually end up reading more books in a year than I would have otherwise. Number 1, and the core thing, was switching from focusing on the number of books I was reading and instead focusing on the amount of time daily or weekly I spent reading. So instead of I'm going to read 10 books a month, I'm going to spend 2 hours a day reading, or I'm going to spend a total of 5 hours over the course of a week reading. So I did do some math. The average novel is between 70,000 and 100,000 words. That means it would take reading at a moderate pace about 6 to 10 hours per book to finish. Let's just say 8 is the average for the sake of this, just as an example. Of course, that might be a little bit different if you are annotating and taking notes like I'm trying to this year and reading more slowly versus reading a little quicker. And again, I don't think we necessarily want to focus on speed reading, but just for the sake of this, 8 hours per book. And if you read about 2 hours a day or 14 hours a week, you could finish easily about 90 books by the end of the year. No problem. This works really well because you are controlling the input instead of the output. And then there's no penalty in your mind for reading really difficult books or long books either. You can really curate your reading list based on what you want to read, not on finishing them quickly. It made it a lot easier for me too, because let's say I set the goal to read 2 hours a day. That couldn't happen every day. Obviously, life happens and sometimes that didn't work out. But I wouldn't feel bad if it was just 15 minutes. And maybe another day later in the week or month, there's more time that I could spend reading, and just made it more flexible and easy to integrate into my actual life. Another tip, connect it to something that you already do every day. I personally put my reading time at the beginning of the day while I'm enjoying my morning coffee, and sometimes a little bit right before I go to sleep. A lot of this for me has been about trying to reduce my screen time, and instead of spending that time there, I decided to pull out my book. The hours are there, it's just sometimes we're spending them in places we don't actually want to be spending them without thinking about it enough. I'm definitely guilty of that. If you're interested in more tips about being more thoughtful about where you're placing your time and attention, I have a Substack article about that and a YouTube video that I will link below, because that's something that I've really been thinking about for the past few years and trying to just be more thoughtful and intentional with. Second big thing that I have tried to focus on more to create a more intentional reading practice has been centering that ritual and environment. So enjoying reading with my morning coffee or right before bed, but also I always light a candle and make a cup of tea to go along with it. That's my ritual, that's setting the tone of my environment, and it's just something I do specifically with reading. Doing little things like this or reading in the same place every time can help support and reinforce the habit that we're trying to establish. I know some people that like to play background music or put one of those cozy videos on YouTube of a fire crackling or windows with snow falling outside, that can be a nice little touch too, if you're into that. The point is, these rituals signal to your brain that you are doing something different now, and you'll start to make the association, and it just helps you get in the frame of mind quicker. Third thing that I started doing is I started giving myself more permission to quit reading a book if I wasn't enjoying it. And this goes back to kind of what I touched on already, where you should really be curating what you're reading based on your interests and what you want to read. If you're reading for enjoyment, right? Sometimes we have to read certain things for school or work or other things, but I think for establishing a really solid reading practice, there has to be some intention behind the books that you're choosing. For example, my video a few weeks ago was about creating a personal curriculum, choosing a couple of books each month that align with my goals and focus for the year. And last week, I touched on some books that I read when I was going through a heartbreak phase of my life and really trying to heal. It doesn't have to be aligned in that way. It can really just be what your interests are and the kind of books that you like to read. But there are so many books in the world and just not enough time. So if you are really not enjoying a book, I think it's okay to put it down. There's absolutely something to be said for, pushing through and finishing a book. And some of my favorite books have ended up being the kind where I didn't fully love them or appreciate what was happening until the very end. But I don't think you have to do that all the time. If you're just not feeling it and your gut is telling you to read something else, do it. Curate your reading list to your tastes, not based on hitting a certain number of books by the end of the year or based on what other people like or want you to read or think you should read. Find the books that align with you. It will make your reading practice so much more enjoyable. I also think it's okay to have a couple of books that you're reading at one time. My mood changes day to day. Sometimes I want to read a quick essay or a short story. Sometimes I want to be immersed in a fictional world. And sometimes I want to learn from someone else's experience or read about a certain period of history. I think it's okay to switch if that feels good for you. And rereading. I didn't reread books for a really long time. I put several rereads in my curriculum that I created for myself for this year. I don't think that rereading is going backwards. There's something new to take from a book every time you read it because you're filtering it through the lens of your experience. And I think it can be fun to take notes and look back on, what you thought of the book 10 years ago, what you learned from it when you read it then versus what is speaking to you now. There's always something new to pick up on. Number 4 is accepting that there are natural rhythms and seasons to your reading practice. Some months you will read a lot more. Maybe things are a little bit slower in life. You have less going on and you just have more time to give to it. And some months you will have so much going on and be so busy that you really can't commit a ton of time to reading on a daily basis. And that's okay. Again, it shouldn't be stressful. It should be an enjoyable part of your life. And the next that aligns to everything that I've outlined before, track without pressure. Don't judge yourself, track for curiosity. So at the end of the year, you can look back and think, what did I read? What did I like the most? What did I get from it? Some people really like to do this with Goodreads or Storygraph. Some people like to write in a journal. I got my first reading journal this year that I'm really excited to use. You can create your own. There are some available online. Even keeping the books that you've read together on a shelf so you can look at them. There are different ways that work different for different people. Just do something that makes sense for you, but find a way to write down and track what you've read. It can be as simple as writing down the title just so that you have it and you can look back and reflect at the end of the year and see how much progress you've made. I personally also love tracking quotes and my thoughts as I've been reading the book. This year I'm trying to annotate a little bit more so that I have those reflections on the page. Even tracking when you quit a book that you don't like, because this is data for you to use in the future about your taste preferences. Next thing I started doing a few years ago is taking a book with me everywhere. When I'm running errands, When I go on trips, I just try to always have a book with me because you can fit in a quick 5 minutes here or there instead of, for me, I'd rather do that than scroll on my phone if I can help it. So those moments add up over time too and give you more reading time throughout the year. Reframe falling off. Again, there are different seasons to reading, so maybe you go through a spell where you don't pick up a book for a week or two or a few months even. Just go back to it. Practice and enjoyment of reading is still there waiting for you when you're ready to pick it up again. No judgment, just return to it. So again, reading is a lifelong practice, not a yearly sprint. You're not trying to win at reading, you're building a relationship with it. The goal isn't more books, it's more quality time spent reading. So take the stress out of it, do what you can to enjoy it. Maybe some of these tips will help you too. And at the end of the year, you'll be able to look back and the progress will be there for sure. I always end up reading more, again, than I would have otherwise, and I think you will too. I look at it like my goal isn't to read 100 books by the end of the year, it's to still be reading 10 years from now, consistently, and finding new books that I love and learning from them, because it adds depth and joy to my life that few other things do in the same way. So just out of curiosity, if you are a goals and numbers oriented person with your reading, comment below and maybe share some of your tips or your thinking around that. Maybe that will be helpful to some people as well. Tell me about what your reading rhythm is, or if you also like to focus on time spent instead and you have some other tips to share, please do. If you like talking about books and culture through a literary lens and creative living, definitely hit subscribe and come back next week. And if you're new here, I'm Lindy. I'm an MFA grad, writer, and former tech content strategist. I love looking at everything in life through the lens of story and books. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week.